Imagine yourself gently drifting back in time, thousands of years, to the serene banks of the Nile. The sun has softly set, casting hues of amber and violet across the horizon, and the bustling activities of the day slowly fade away. You step quietly into a modest Egyptian home. The walls, simple yet welcoming, are constructed of sun-dried bricks, warmed by the day's sun and now gently cooling with the onset of evening. Inside, oil lamps cast a soft golden glow, illuminating your sleeping quarters. Your eyes wander to the bed awaiting you. It's not quite what you would expect in modern comfort. Instead of a plush mattress and a fluffy pillow, you find a meticulously crafted headrest, carved carefully from wood or sometimes stone. The surface is polished smooth from years of gentle use, cool to the touch, and shaped precisely to cradle your head and neck. In ancient Egypt, headrests were not mere objects of convenience, but essential tools in preserving elaborate hairstyles. Hairstyles, especially among the wealthier classes, could take hours to craft, meticulously arranged with scented waxes, oils, and intricate braids or curls. To sleep without disturbing these carefully arranged styles was of paramount importance. Thus, the headrest provided just enough support to elevate your head comfortably while preventing any accidental disruptions to your delicate coiffure. As you lower yourself gently onto your bed, you carefully align your head onto the curved, crescent-shaped headrest. It feels firm, yet oddly reassuring, like the protective embrace of ancient traditions. You breathe deeply. The calming fragrances of lotus blossoms and myrrh oils linger softly in the air from your evening bath. Lying still, your eyes softly close. Outside, you hear the tranquil sounds of nighttime, a distant murmur from the Nile, gentle rustling of palm fronds, and perhaps the quiet hum of nighttime insects. Beneath your head, the wooden headrest provides steady reassurance, a reminder of tradition and beauty. You relax deeper, feeling a gentle sense of connection to generations of Egyptians who similarly lay in contemplation, their dreams floating quietly through the stillness of the night. Tonight, as you drift gently to sleep, consider the balance ancient Egyptians sought between comfort and beauty, practicality and preservation. They understood sleep not just as rest, but as a respectful passage from day to night, from wakefulness to dreams, preserving the physical beauty that defined their daily lives. And now, let yourself drift deeper into sleep, carried softly by the whispers of history, safely cradled by the wisdom of an ancient culture that valued elegance, ritual, and harmony in every aspect of life, even in the quiet moments before sleep. Rest now, knowing you're gently guarded by centuries of wisdom, comfortably cradled in traditions long revered. Let your dreams softly unfold, undisturbed by the passage of time. In the quiet of the Egyptian night, sleep was more than a retreat into rest. It was a portal to the divine. The Egyptians believed dreams carried messages from the gods, gentle whispers of guidance, warning, or blessing. For those who longed for clarity or answers, sleep itself became a ritual, carefully prepared and deeply sacred. Imagine yourself walking into a temple dedicated to Hathor, goddess of love and joy, or perhaps to Bes, the protective household god known for chasing away nightmares. The air is heavy with incense, swirling tendrils of frankincense and myrrh rising upward, carrying prayers into the unseen. You bring with you offerings, perhaps bread, fruit, or flowers, and lay them gently before the statue of the god. The temple is dim, lit only by flickering lamps, their flames dancing like stars on stone walls covered with painted hieroglyphs. You are led into a special chamber known as a sleeping hall. Instead of soft bedding, a cool stone slab awaits you. You lie down, the hardness grounding you, the chill seeping through your linen garments. As you close your eyes, priests chant softly, their voices rising and falling like the rhythm of the Nile. Each note lulls you deeper, preparing your mind to wander beyond the physical world. This ritual, called dream incubation, was not uncommon among those desperate for answers. A farmer might come seeking guidance for his crops. A woman might ask for fertility, or a soldier might hope for protection in the coming battle. Each would sleep in sacred stillness, hoping their dreams would be touched by the gods. As you drift into slumber, your mind opens, your spirit loosens its ties to your body, and visions begin to form. Perhaps you dream of a river overflowing, symbolizing abundance. Or perhaps you see a snake coiled in the dust, a warning of treachery. When you awaken, priests and dream interpreters gather, listening intently as you describe each image, each sensation, each lingering fragment. They weigh the meanings, consult scrolls, and offer interpretations weaving together divine insight and human wisdom. For Egyptians, dreams were more than fleeting fantasies of the sleeping mind. They were sacred dialogues, a chance to touch the eternal. And so each night spent in such rituals was a step closer to the gods themselves, a gentle merging of the mortal and the divine in the quiet hours of sleep. Now, as you lie in your own bed, imagine this journey, falling asleep not to escape the day, but to seek wisdom. Each dream a message, each vision a gift, softly carried to you on the wings of the night. As darkness enveloped the land of Egypt, the night was seen as a time of both rest and danger. Shadows were believed to be filled with spirits, wandering souls, and forces that might disrupt sleep or even cause harm. To counter this, Egyptians turned to rituals of protection, weaving together prayer, charms, and sacred objects to ensure safety during the vulnerable hours of slumber. Picture yourself in a modest Egyptian bedroom as night settles in. Before lying down, you gently place a small amulet of the Eye of Horus beside your headrest. Its form, etched into stone or faience, glows faintly in the lamplight. The Eye of Horus was believed to ward off evil and restore health, serving as a silent guardian through the night. Perhaps you wear another amulet around your neck, depicting Bes, the squat, lion-faced household god, who was both comical and fierce. His presence near the bed was thought to scare away nightmares, mischievous spirits, and any forces that dared creep near the threshold of dreams. Mothers would often carve tiny figures of Bes and hang them over cradles, believing his fierce scowl and sticking-out tongue kept infants safe. Incantations, softly spoken before sleep, floated through Egyptian households. A father might murmur a prayer for protection over his family. A mother might quietly whisper charms against snakes and scorpions that prowled the warm desert nights. These words, spoken into the stillness, wove an invisible shield of safety. And then there was the careful use of oils and incense. Before resting, families burned kifi, a fragrant mixture of wine, honey, raisins, resin, and herbs. Its smoke drifted lazily through the home, believed to purify the air, calm the body, and keep malevolent spirits at bay. As the scent settled, so too did peace, creating a cocoon of safety around the household. For the Egyptians, protection in sleep was not a casual act, but a vital ritual. To sleep without safeguards was to risk wandering spirits or ill fortune. Each charm, each prayer, each wisp of incense was a reminder that even in rest, vigilance was necessary. As you settle into your own bed tonight, imagine these ancient protections surrounding you. A tiny amulet at your side, the scent of sweet smoke curling in the air, a whisper of prayer spoken into the stillness, and feel, as the Egyptians once did, the gentle reassurance of being guarded through the quiet journey of sleep. To the ancient Egyptians, even the direction in which you slept carried deep significance. They believed the body was part of a cosmic order, and that aligning oneself properly with the world's natural forces brought health, balance, and divine protection. Bed placement was no mere afterthought. It was a deliberate act of harmony with the universe, reflecting their belief that sleep was both a physical necessity and a sacred passage for the soul. Imagine stepping into a chamber along the Nile where the air is thick with the scent of oil lamps. The bed, crafted from wooden frames laced with woven reeds or leather thongs, is not simply furniture, it is a sacred platform. Wealthier households might adorn these beds with ivory inlays, gilded legs shaped like lion's paws, or images of protective gods carved into the headboard. Even in more modest homes, care was taken to orient and arrange the bed in a way that resonated with the unseen forces of the cosmos. For Egyptians, lying down to sleep was akin to preparing for a miniature death. The soul wandered in dreams and returned only if harmony was preserved. Thus, bed placement was a symbolic act of preparing the soul's nightly journey. Egyptians preferred to align their beds along a north-south axis. This was not arbitrary. The Nile flowed from south to north, and the stars wheeled across the sky in eternal cycles, marking time and seasons. Sleeping with one's body aligned to this cosmic flow was thought to ensure balance and vitality. Priests taught that to rest this way allowed the spirit to travel more easily along the same currents that carried the river and guided the heavens. In contrast, to lie east to west was considered disruptive. Such alignment placed the sleeper crosswise against the cosmic order, inviting restlessness, illness, or bad dreams. Parents would warn children that ignoring this practice might cause their dreams to be twisted or their spirit to lose its way in the night. This principle extended beyond bedrooms. Priests, scholars, and builders applied similar alignments when laying out temples, tombs, and pyramids. Just as the Great Pyramids were carefully oriented to the stars of Orion's belt or the rising sun, so too could the human body be aligned in microcosm. To Egyptians, the human bed was a miniature temple, and the act of sleep a sacred ritual mirroring cosmic patterns. Some believed it mattered whether the head pointed north or south. Pointing the head north aligned it with constellations associated with Osiris, god of the afterlife, granting dreams that carried wisdom from the dead. Sleeping with the head south, by contrast, was thought to connect one to fertility and renewal, invoking the life-giving powers of the Nile's southern source. Families might even change orientation seasonally, depending on what blessings they sought most: renewal in planting season or ancestral guidance during times of uncertainty. Picture yourself lying down on such a bed. The air is warm. The flicker of an oil lamp dances across plastered walls painted with lotus motifs. Before sleep, you adjust the bed slightly, aligning it with care so that your body points true to the north-south axis. The orientation feels purposeful, almost ceremonial. As you close your eyes, you imagine yourself not merely resting, but syncing with the very forces that govern heaven and earth. The steady hum of night insects outside becomes a chorus of nature, keeping rhythm with the stars, and your body feels as though it drifts on invisible currents shared by both river and sky. In this way, Egyptians transformed even the simple act of lying down into a quiet ritual of cosmic balance. It was more than superstition, it was an acknowledgement that sleep was not just of the body, but of the soul. Each night the soul wandered far, and alignment was a way to ensure it returned safely with the dawn. By orienting their beds, Egyptians invited harmony, protection, and sacred order into the most vulnerable hours of their existence. Thus, the Egyptian bedroom was not only a place of rest, but a microcosm of the universe, where wood and reed echoed the pyramids, and where every dream began in perfect alignment with the cosmos. As twilight deepened over the Nile, and shadows stretched long and quiet across the earth, the homes of ancient Egyptians began to hum with a gentle rhythm, not of toil, but of sacred preparation. Evening was not merely a pause between work and sleep. It was a hinge between two worlds, day and night, life and dream, body and soul. And to cross that threshold safely, Egyptians engaged in rituals, offerings, and gestures of devotion that softened the space between the seen and the unseen. Inside a modest mud brick home, nestled among fields of barley and flax, a woman crouched low near a small shrine in the corner of the room. The shrine, though simple, was not neglected. Upon it sat a figurine of Taweret, the hippopotamus-bodied goddess of protection, her round belly and lion's feet symbols of fierce guardianship. Next to her, a tiny bowl cradled dried herbs, resin, and yesterday's ashes. These household gods, lesser than those worshipped in great temples, but no less sacred, stood vigil over family and hearth. They asked for very little, and so much was given. The woman gently unwrapped a small linen pouch. Inside were a few grains of roasted wheat, a cluster of figs, and a dribble of dark honey. She placed them near the shrine without a word. These were not extravagant offerings, but they were meaningful, each one a thread woven into the family's protection. Bread for sustenance, fruit for sweetness, honey for favor. Her husband stepped forward, clutching a small cup of cool beer, and poured a few drops into the dust beside the doorway, a gift for any spirits that might linger near the threshold, reminding them to pass by in peace. As the youngest child extinguished the last of the lamps, she whispered a small chant taught to her by her grandmother, a few simple lines asking the spirits of the house to guard her dreams. The room dimmed into stillness. The smell of oil and cooling earth filled the space, and the flicker of flame became memory. Each breath the family took now felt different, slower, quieter, more deliberate. Sleep did not rush in like a tide. It was summoned like a guest. In wealthier homes, the rituals were more elaborate, but the heart of them was the same. Beside curtained beds and gilded furniture, women poured perfumed oils into alabaster bowls and washed their hands with water steeped in sacred lotus petals. Children lit small cones of incense, watching as the smoke spiraled upward like prayers with no need for words. Elderly relatives traced protective symbols in ash on the floorboards near the bed. Circles, eyes, zigzag lines, each meant to confuse any spirit or curse that dared approach while the family slept. In some homes, a tiny loaf of bread was left uneaten on the windowsill, not for mice or birds, but for ancestors. It was believed that the dead visited quietly, drifting like vapor through doorways and rafters, drawn not by grief, but by memory. A loaf left untouched was an invitation to remain close, to offer protection from the beyond. Other households placed shallow bowls of water under their beds. These were not for drinking. Some said the water caught bad dreams, anchoring them so they could not return. Others believed it cooled the path of restless spirits, allowing them to pass without heat or friction. Whatever the reason, the water remained until morning, when it was poured away into the earth with care, never wasted, never taken lightly. One might think these rituals were performed out of fear, but they were not. They were born of reverence. The Egyptians understood that sleep was not emptiness. It was a sacred voyage into a space where gods whispered and the soul wandered. To sleep without preparation was to walk barefoot through wild places. But to honor the night with offerings, to light incense and pour wine and speak the names of ancestors, was to chart a course across that wilderness with lanterns lit. In those final moments before slumber, there was stillness, but not silence. The household was quiet, but not empty. The room breathed with unseen presence. The ancestors listened. The gods stood watch. The very walls, smoothed by years of touch, seemed to lean inward, as if listening to the crackle of fading embers and the soft hum of dreams beginning. Now, as you lie down, imagine this soft choreography: the flick of a lamp's flame, the scent of honeyed fig, the murmured chant of a child speaking protection into the dark. Picture the bowl of water glowing with moonlight beneath a carved bed frame. Feel the weight of rituals old and sacred, pressing gently on your skin like the touch of a grandmother's hand. The night is deep, but it is not lonely. You are surrounded. And so you rest not with vulnerability, but with peace. You have given your offerings. The night has been honored. The way ahead is quiet and open. Let yourself sleep now as they once did, wrapped in tradition, bathed in gentle smoke, and guided by those who came before. The gods are near. Your ancestors are close, and you are held. Among the sacred temples of Egypt, where towering pylons rose against the desert sky, and the scent of incense never ceased, there existed a practice as mysterious as it was revered: the healing sleep of the sick. For the Egyptians, sleep could be more than rest or divine communion. It could be a cure, a bridge between frailty and restoration, guided by the presence of the gods. Imagine yourself stepping through the massive stone gateway of a temple devoted to Imhotep, the deified architect and healer, a man whose wisdom had elevated him to the status of a god long after his mortal death. Pilgrims arrived from distant villages, limping on wounded legs, clutching afflicted children, or weakened by fevers that local remedies could not ease. They came to sleep not at home, but under the watchful gaze of priests, who served as intermediaries between mortals and the divine. The temple's interior was cool, its columns soaring, painted with lotus and papyrus motifs. Oil lamps flickered at the feet of great statues, and the murmur of chants echoed softly in the high chamber. Patients bathed in sacred water before entering the sleeping halls, their bodies cleansed of dust and sin alike. Priests anointed them with oils, cedar, myrrh, and lotus, fragrant mixtures thought to align the soul with divine favor. Then, at last, the sick were led to rows of reed mats spread across the cool floor of a sanctum. There they lay in stillness, waiting for dreams. The priests whispered invocations, summoning Imhotep and other gods of healing to walk gently through the sleeper's visions. To close one's eyes here was not to rest, but to seek intervention. In the silence of the sanctuary, patients waited as visions bloomed behind their closed eyes. Some dreamed of serpents, which the priests would interpret as a sign of renewal, shedding of illness like old skin. Others saw flowing water, a symbol of purification and the washing away of disease. Upon waking, each pilgrim would recount their dream to the priests, who carefully recorded and interpreted every detail. The dream itself was the diagnosis, and the words of the gods delivered in sleep were the prescription. Priests would then prescribe herbal remedies, ritual baths, or protective amulets to reinforce the divine message. In this way, sleep in the temple became not just healing of the body, but a sacred communion of spirit and medicine. To rest beneath Imhotep's watch was to trust that even in slumber, the gods could weave the fabric of recovery. And as the dawnlight filtered into the temple's high halls, the sick would rise lighter, comforted not only by the touch of ritual, but by the conviction that the divine had walked through their dreams and left healing in their wake. Yet the experience did not end with waking. Pilgrims often remained in the temple for days, repeating the cycle of bathing, anointing, sleeping, and recounting visions. Each night's dreams layered upon the last, forming a tapestry of divine counsel. Priests compared one dream to another, discerning patterns and signs, crafting a pathway of recovery guided by both medicine and mysticism. Families waiting outside the halls would bring food and offerings, sustaining the patient and contributing to the sacred exchange. In this way, the temple became both hospital and monastery, a place where sleep was cultivated as carefully as crops in the field. The architecture itself seemed designed to cradle the weary, high ceilings to cool the air, painted stars on chamber roofs to mimic the heavens, and carved inscriptions reminding sleepers that they lay beneath the gaze of the gods. To close one's eyes in such a place was to surrender completely to forces beyond the body, to allow the breath of divinity to weave into fragile lungs. And so, for the Egyptians, healing was not a matter of herbs alone, nor of chance, nor of sleep, but it was the union of them all, a weaving of body, spirit, temple, and cosmos into a single fabric of restoration, stitched together one dream at a time. In later centuries, pilgrims would still speak of this practice in hushed tones, recalling nights when the temple itself seemed alive, its columns like guardians watching over them as they drifted beyond pain. Some claimed to wake healed entirely, while others left with only small relief, yet all departed with the certainty that they had touched something larger than themselves. The priests reminded them that healing was a journey, not a single moment, and that each dream was another step toward wholeness. In the hush of dawn, as incense smoke curled into the pale sky, the temple emptied slowly, but its sanctity lingered like a fragrance carried on the wind. To seek sleep here was to surrender not only illness, but the illusion of solitude. For in these nights of healing, mortals did not dream alone. They dreamed with the gods, in the stillness beyond the cities and the villages, where the desert stretched vast and unbroken, lay the necropolises of ancient Egypt, silent cities for the dead. Here, sleep was not temporary, not a nightly passage between dusk and dawn, but an eternal state, carefully prepared and deeply honored. The Egyptians believed that death itself was a kind of sleep, a slumber from which the soul might awaken in another world, reborn among the stars or in the fields of reeds beyond the horizon. Imagine descending into a tomb carved deep into the rock, torchlight flickering against painted walls. The air is heavy, still, almost reverent. Scenes of feasts, gardens, and river journeys spread across the plaster, painted to remind the soul of pleasures once known and to promise their return in eternity. At the center lies the sarcophagus, its heavy stone lid etched with prayers and protective spells. Within it rests the mummy, wrapped tightly in linen, head cradled on a carved headrest, like those used by the living. Even in death, the sleeper was not denied the comforts of slumber. The tomb was more than a resting place. It was a bedroom for eternity, stocked with all that the soul might need for its endless night. Jars of food and drink, clothing, amulets, and even furniture crowded the chamber, arranged so the deceased would want for nothing. Perfumed oils and garlands of dried lotus flowers, long faded yet still fragrant in imagination, were placed near the body. Priests recited the spells of the Book of the Dead, guiding the sleeper through the treacherous passages of the afterlife, as though whispering lullabies against the dark. Silence reigned in these places, but it was not an empty silence. It was the hush of waiting, the pause before awakening, the breath of eternity itself. The Egyptians did not fear this endless sleep. To them it was a continuation of life, guarded by the gods, lit by the eternal stars, and softened by the careful hands of family and priests who had prepared every detail. They believed that within this sleep, the soul wandered until it found its place in the next world, renewed and unburdened. As you imagine lying within such a chamber, the stone cool against your skin, the painted eyes of protective deities gazing down upon you, consider how the Egyptians blurred the line between sleep and death. To them, both were journeys, both required preparation, both were sacred. Sleep each night rehearsed death. Death itself was the great sleep, carried out with offerings, prayers, and the promise of awakening beyond the veil of time. And so the silence of the tombs was not fearsome, but tender, a quiet sanctuary for souls who slept beneath the desert sands, dreaming their way into eternity. The stillness of the necropolis was broken only by the shifting winds, carrying whispers of sand across sealed doorways. Within, time seemed to dissolve. Oil lamps left for the dead guttered and went dark centuries ago, yet their soot still blackened the ceilings, as if reminding visitors that even eternal sleep had once been accompanied by flickers of light. Families returned often in the early years, bringing offerings of bread, onions, beer, or flowers, laying them in small niches carved into the walls. They would press their lips against carved false doors, speaking words of love and remembrance, believing their voices reached the sleeper within. Over generations the offerings dwindled, but the silence remained faithful, enfolding the dead in a shroud of peace. For the Egyptians, this silence was not an absence, but a promise, that the slumbering ones would awaken renewed in the afterlife, their souls passing through trials with the same assurance as nightly dreamers finding their way back to morning. To stand among these tombs was to feel the weight of countless dreams layered upon one another, and to understand that for the Egyptians, sleep and death were never separate. They were part of the same great rhythm, a cycle of descent and return, silence and awakening, forever entwined. The Egyptians believed that each night, as the body rested, the soul itself undertook a journey. To them, sleep was never merely closing the eyes and drifting into unconsciousness. It was a voyage into the unseen, a rehearsal for the grand passage into the afterlife. When the chest rose and fell in slumber, it was said that the ba, the winged aspect of the soul, slipped free from the body, fluttering out into the world like a bird at dusk. Imagine the sensation of your soul lifting gently as you fall asleep, drifting upward from your chest, hovering above your bed where your body still lies in stillness. The Egyptians envisioned the ba as a bird with a human face, able to move freely between realms. During sleep, this part of you would visit ancestors, consult with gods, or wander along the banks of the Nile, invisible to waking eyes. Each journey was fragile, delicate, requiring the body to remain protected so that the soul might return safely at dawn. Families took this belief seriously. Amulets of the heart scarab or the eye were placed near sleepers to guard the tether that bound soul to body. Without such care, one risked the soul becoming lost in dreamscapes too deep, or failing to find its way back when morning light spilled into the room. Priests taught that dreams of flying or falling reflected the soul's nightly wanderings, signs that the journey was real, not imagined. The night journey of the soul also mirrored the voyage of Ra, the sun god, who sailed through the underworld each night on his bark. Just as Ra battled serpents and shadows before rising again renewed in the dawn, so too did the soul struggle through dreams, encountering visions that could be blessings or trials. To awaken safely was a triumph, a small rebirth echoing the cosmic rhythm of the sun's eternal return. And so, each act of falling asleep was an act of faith. Closing one's eyes meant trusting that the soul would leave, wander, learn, and then return, slipping once more into the chest with the first light of morning. To sleep was to risk, but also to renew, and in this nightly cycle the Egyptians saw the truth of existence itself, that life was a journey of endless departures and homecomings, an unbroken rhythm of loss and return, darkness and dawn. To drift asleep was to entrust the most delicate part of oneself to invisible pathways, a trust built on faith and ritual. Some believed the Ba could soar far beyond Egypt, wandering among stars and visiting realms untouched by waking feet. Others thought it lingered closer, circling the home, watching family members as they slept, ensuring bonds of kinship endured even in the silence of night. The return of the soul at dawn was cause for quiet gratitude. Each sunrise was proof that the voyage had ended safely, that breath and body and spirit had been reunited. In this way, every morning was not routine, but miraculous, another chance to live. And so with each evening, Egyptians accepted sleep as both departure and promise, their nightly journeys echoing the eternal cycle of Ra, forever leaving and forever returning, until the final sleep, when the soul would travel on without the need to return at all. As twilight descended upon Egypt and lamps were extinguished one by one, sleep was not welcomed with emptiness, but with sound, or the absence of it. The Egyptians believed that music and silence were both thresholds, each capable of guiding the soul across the fragile boundary between waking and dreaming. In great temples and humble homes alike, the night was tuned carefully, orchestrated like a ritual song. In the homes of farmers and artisans, the hum of crickets outside blended with the crackle of dying embers on the hearth. Mothers rocked infants with lullabies, ancient songs passed down from grandmothers, their melodies soft as woven linen, their words stitched with prayers. The names of protective gods were tucked into these songs like charms, Hathor, Isis, Bes. The sound itself was believed to carry power, forming a barrier against whatever might lurk in the unseen dark. To sing was not merely to soothe, but to defend. Among the wealthy, music accompanied evening meals and lingered as families prepared for bed. Harpists plucked gentle chords, the notes floating like ripples across a pool. Flutes whispered through courtyards heavy with night jasmine, each tone meant to coax calm into restless hearts. When guests departed and servants withdrew, the music softened, until silence itself became its own kind of song, a stillness as deliberate as melody. In temples, the role of music was even more profound. Priests trained in the use of sistrums, metal rattles sacred to Hathor, would shake them in rhythmic patterns before sleepers entered dream incubation chambers. The vibration was said to clear the mind, aligning it with harmony before surrendering to sleep. Drums, deep and steady, echoed heartbeats, a reminder that the sleeper's body was a vessel and must remain tethered while the soul wandered. When the last sound faded, silence descended like a second skin, enveloping the chamber until only the breath of the dreamers remained. Silence itself carried weight in Egyptian thought. It was not emptiness, but presence, the realm where the gods might whisper. To enter silence was to step into sacred space, and so before sleeping, many households fell deliberately quiet. Children were hushed, laughter subdued, footsteps softened. Even animals seemed to sense this transition, their movements slow, their eyes reflecting lamplight before surrendering to stillness. This hush was an offering, a sign of respect for the night and the spirits who moved within it. Some households believed certain sounds at night carried omens. The hoot of an owl might be seen as the voice of a wandering soul, and dogs barking at unseen figures were taken as signs that restless spirits lingered nearby. To counter this, chants or whispered recitations were spoken to reassert harmony. These were not long or elaborate, but brief phrases, reminders that order must hold over chaos even as the world slept. In this balance between music and silence, between sound and stillness, Egyptians found the threshold of dreams. To them, drifting into sleep was not sudden but prepared, as though one were escorted into the night by a procession of notes that entrusted to silence for the remainder of the journey. Imagine lying in a mud brick room, hearing a lullaby fade, or resting beneath painted stars in a temple chamber as the last drumbeat falls away. Your breath matches the rhythm of silence itself, and you cross over into the dream world, gently, reverently. The Egyptians understood that the journey into dreams was fragile, like a boat setting sail across dark waters. Music was the oar that pushed it away from shore. Silence was the vast water that held it. And so each night was a voyage, guided by sound, sustained by quiet, until the first bird of dawn called the soul home again. Beyond the careful rituals of music and silence, the Egyptians also turned their eyes skyward each night, seeking comfort and meaning in the patterns of the heavens. To them, the night sky was not an empty canvas, but a living map of gods, spirits, and stories. The moon, the stars, and the wandering planets were all seen as divine companions who walked beside mortals in their hours of darkness. Imagine standing outside a mud brick home as the final lamp sputters out. Above, the desert sky reveals itself in full splendor, unbroken by clouds or smoke. The Milky Way stretches like a silver river across the heavens, a mirror of the Nile that flows endlessly below. Egyptians gazed upward and saw not random specks of light, but the souls of the blessed dead, the eternal guardians who had joined the cosmic order. To sleep beneath their gaze was to be held in the company of ancestors. Families sometimes left offerings not only for household gods, but for the night sky itself. A bowl of milk placed at the edge of a courtyard was meant for Khonsu, the moon god, whose light watched over travelers and sleepers alike. The silver glow of the moon was thought to cool fevers, ease troubled dreams, and guide the soul safely through its wanderings. Bread or beer might be set aside for Sopdet, the star we call Sirius, whose Heliaco rising marked the flood of the Nile. To honor her was to honor the cycle of renewal itself, the rhythm of life tied inseparably to water and sky. For the priests, the stars were more than symbols, they were navigational points of ritual. In great temples, roof chapels opened to the night so that chants could be timed to the passage of constellations. Sleep within such a space was not only personal but cosmic, as if one were cradled by the turning heavens themselves. Painted ceilings in tombs often showed constellations, ensuring that the dead, in their eternal sleep, rested beneath the same sky that had comforted them in life. The moon was a trusted companion, but it could also be a source of unease. Its changing phases were believed to influence dreams. A bright full moon might bring vivid visions, while the dark moon was feared as a time when protective light was absent, when spirits moved more freely. To counter this, amulets were set beside beds and prayers spoken to call back the silver light, even when the sky appeared empty. Among common people, the stars also offered stories for children drifting into sleep. A mother might point to Orion, seeing in its form Osiris, the eternal king. She would whisper tales of his death and rebirth, reminding her child that even in the silence of night, renewal always came with dawn. These tales lulled little ones into slumber, each story a thread binding them to the heavens above. The Egyptians understood night as a covenant between earth and sky. To lie down was to enter into that agreement, to let the moon guard your passage and the stars mark your course. Sleep was not taken alone, but beneath the eyes of gods and ancestors, with offerings laid out to acknowledge their eternal vigil. As the household fell still, the heavens themselves became part of the ritual, a vast ceiling of light and shadow under which every dream unfolded. And so, in the still hours of Egyptian nights, mortals honored not only what lay within their homes, but what stretched infinite above them. Sleep was a joining, a moment when body, spirit, and sky aligned. When the dawn returned and the offerings were cleared away, the Egyptians carried with them the quiet knowledge that they had rested beneath the watch of gods written in the stars. As the hours deepened past midnight and the desert air grew cooler, there were those who believed that sleep alone was not enough to protect the fragile spirit. The Egyptians knew that darkness had two faces. It could be gentle and restorative, but it was also the hour when restless spirits stirred, when wandering souls sought doors into the world of the living, and when the balance between order and chaos was most precarious. To face this midnight threshold, many turned to prayer. Soft, whispered words, meant not only for the ears of gods, but also for the heart of the sleeper. Picture a small household by the banks of the Nile. The family has long since settled into their reed mats, their breathing even and calm. Yet one elder remains awake, seated cross-legged beside the doorway. In his hands is a small oil lamp, its flame flickering but steady, casting long shadows across the walls. He whispers a prayer to Ma'at, goddess of truth and balance, asking that the night remain ordered, that no spirit of chaos be allowed to enter. His words are almost indistinguishable from the rustling of palm leaves outside, but to him they are powerful, for he believes that the gods hear even the faintest murmur in the stillness of night. Midnight prayers were not confined to homes. In temples, priests kept vigils, their rituals timed to the slow march of the stars. The temple did not sleep. It breathed with the rhythm of chants, offerings, and watchfulness. At precise intervals, priests recited litanies to Ra, who was, at that very moment, voyaging through the perilous underworld, locked in combat with the serpent Apophis. They prayed not only for themselves, but for the survival of the sun itself. For if Ra failed to triumph, dawn would never come. To lie down in sleep was thus to entrust one's breath to the courage of the gods, to believe that their struggle through the night would ensure morning light. Even in tombs, prayers inscribed on walls and coffins were meant to function as eternal vigils. The dead were given words that would rise up like incense when darkness thickened, protective spells that never ceased their recitation. In this way, Egyptians believed that their souls were never abandoned, not even in the deepest reaches of eternity. For the common farmer or artisan, midnight prayers might have been short and simple, no longer than a few breaths. A whispered plea to Bes to frighten away nightmares. A soft invocation to Isis to protect children in their cradles. Some households believed in rising briefly at midnight, not to disturb sleep, but to acknowledge the turning of hours. They would relight a lamp, pour a drop of beer upon the ground, and then return to their mats, comforted by the gesture. It was a quiet recognition that night was long and full of mysteries, and that vigilance, even in small ways, was necessary. The act of prayer itself transformed midnight into something other than fear. The hush became sacred. The silence of the desert was no longer empty, but filled with the presence of divine guardians. When one returned to sleep after such prayers, it was with a lighter heart, as though one had spoken directly into the ear of eternity. The Egyptians did not see prayer as bargaining or pleading. It was conversation, a simple reminder to the gods that mortals were waiting, sleeping, trusting. And so, in the darkest hours of night, when dreams wandered and shadows stretched long, the Egyptians met the uncertainty not with despair, but with devotion. Their whispered prayers rose into the starlit sky, fragile yet enduring, carried by faith that no silence was truly empty. As sleep carried Egyptians into the deeper hours of the night, many believed that unseen guardians stood watch at the very edges of dreams. These guardians were not always lofty gods distant in the heavens, but often small and familiar spirits whose presence was woven into the walls of homes and the corners and beds. Their task was simple yet profound, to keep nightmares, wandering souls, and hostile forces at bay while mortals lay helpless in slumber. Among these protectors, none was more beloved than Bes, the dwarf god with wild hair, leonine features, and a mischievous grin. He was not grand like Ra or Osiris, but intimate and domestic, a god who belonged in kitchens, bedrooms, and nurseries. Small amulets of Bes, carved from faience or ivory, were hung near sleeping places. Mothers painted his image on headboards, believing that his grotesque, playful face could frighten away evil spirits and laughter-loving demons of the night. Children especially were entrusted to him, their sleep softened by his protection, their dreams steered away from fear. Another guardian often invoked was Taweret, the hippo-shaped goddess of childbirth and family. Her swollen belly and leonine paws made her a formidable sight, yet to the Egyptians she was the embodiment of maternal strength. Women prayed to her before sleep, asking that she keep watch over infants through the long hours until dawn. Her image carved on household shrines served as a silent sentinel, a reminder that no child slept without a divine mother watching near. Protective rituals accompanied these guardians. Before lying down, families might scatter a pinch of natron salt at thresholds, believing it created a barrier against wandering spirits. A small bowl of water was sometimes placed at the bedside, meant to trap malevolent forces who might otherwise slip into dreams. Priests and magicians prepared short spells that ordinary people could recite. A handful of words whispered over a child's bed, a phrase traced in dust on the floor. These were small acts, but they carried weight, for each was believed to anchor the soul more firmly in safety as it wandered in the dream world. Nightmares themselves were considered visitations, warnings from gods or the whispering of unquiet spirits. To banish them, families recited protective hymns as dawn approached, washing away the residue of bad dreams like dust swept from a threshold. Amulets shaped like eyes or scarabs were placed on chests to ensure that the soul's return to the body was smooth and untroubled. Some even believed that a cat sleeping nearby kept spirits away, its glowing eyes piercing the dark more effectively than any lamp. To imagine an Egyptian household at night is to see layers of guardianship: a lamp burning low, casting shadows, a child clutching a tiny amulet of Bes, a mother whispering Tauret's name, a father scattering salt along the doorway. Each act created a fortress around the fragile state of sleep, invisible walls rising against chaos. In this way, Egyptians did not see slumber as passive surrender, but as a vulnerable passage safeguarded by ritual and by divine allies. Thus, as dreams unfolded and the soul wandered, the sleepers of Egypt lay not defenseless, but wrapped in the care of countless guardians. Some were pre-gods steering the sun through the underworld. Others were humble spirits carved into amulets or painted on walls. Together they formed a shield, ensuring that sleep was not only possible, but safe, and that every dawn was return, not a loss. To the Egyptians, dreams were not random images flickering through a tired mind. They were communications, letters written in the shifting script of sleep, dispatched from gods, ancestors, or spirits who moved freely when the body lay still. To awaken from a dream was to rise holding a fragment of divine speech, a message veiled in symbols that required both memory and interpretation. Dream books were compiled by scribes and priests, collections of symbols with their possible meanings. If one dreamed of a crocodile, it might signify danger near the riverbanks. If of a lotus blooming, it was a promise of health and renewal. A dream of sailing smoothly across the Nile could herald success, while a dream of a capsized boat might foretell loss. These interpretations were not private, but shared within families, recounted in the morning as carefully as one might recite news from a traveler just returned from abroad. Priests often served as interpreters, trained to read the language of the dream world. In temple precincts, dream oracles were sought by the desperate and the hopeful alike. A man uncertain of his business prospects might sleep within a sacred chamber, hoping for a vision of Thoth, god of wisdom, who could guide him. A woman longing for a child might pray to Hathor before sleep, her dreams watched carefully for signs of promise. Even kings were not above this practice. Pharaohs listened to their dreams as omens of war, prosperity, or divine favor, their visions recorded by scribes as part of the chronicle of the kingdom. For ordinary Egyptians, recounting a dream was a daily ritual. Families gathered at dawn, speaking softly over bread and beer, recalling what images lingered from the night. They debated together. Was the appearance of a snake a sign of protection from the goddess Wadjet, or was it a warning of hidden enemies? Dreams became shared puzzles, their meanings pieced together like fragments of pottery assembled into a vessel. Nightmares, too, were treated as messages. They might be warnings from protective deities, or assaults from malevolent spirits. To counter these, prayers were recited, charms renewed, and bad dreams symbolically washed away with water poured onto the earth. In this way, fear itself was transformed into ritual, the unsettling fragments of night rewoven into the fabric of order. To sleep in Egypt, then, was not simply to rest. It was to open oneself to dialogue with the unseen, to carry each morning into daylight with the echoes of divine voices still whispering at the edges of memory. Dreams were threads binding mortals to gods, fragile but powerful, weaving the human story into the eternal tapestry of the cosmos. In Egypt, sleep was never seen as an idle pause, but as a reflection of cosmic order itself. Just as the sun rose and set with unfailing rhythm, so too was slumber considered a sacred cycle that mirrored the greater harmony of the universe. At its heart was Maat, the goddess of balance, truth, and rightness, whose invisible hand held creation steady against the chaos that forever threatened to unravel it. To To lie down each night was to surrender into her keeping. Families believed that as the world quieted and bodies stilled, Ma'at's order had to be reaffirmed. A father might whisper her name before closing his eyes. A child might repeat a simple phrase learned from a grandmother, short affirmations that life was aligned, that chaos would not intrude. These were not elaborate invocations, but simple acknowledgments, threads of order woven into the fragile fabric of sleep. The Egyptians feared not only nightmares, but also disorder in the very act of resting. Too much sleep was seen as dangerous, a sign that one was slipping toward lethargy and decline. Too little left the body open to imbalance, irritability, and weakness. Just as fields had to be watered but not flooded, so too the body required its portion of rest, measured, balanced, in harmony with the cycles of day and night. Oversleeping or sleeplessness were both considered signs that Ma'at was slipping, that something within one's life or household was askew. Even the architecture of Egyptian homes reflected this concern for balance. Sleeping spaces were modest, placed away from loud courtyards, their simplicity a reminder that excess could invite disruption. In wealthier homes, rooms might be perfumed with lotus or incense to maintain harmony, while in more humble dwellings, families relied on fresh rushes spread across the floor and windows that allowed the night breeze to carry coolness through. What mattered most was not luxury, but equilibrium, the careful attention to order that Ma'at demanded. Priests taught that the very posture of sleep carried meaning. To rest with the body straight and the head supported symbolized order and readiness, while restless tossing was a mark of imbalance. Parents corrected their children gently, guiding them to stillness not only for comfort, but for spiritual alignment. Even dreams were weighed in this way. Visions of harmony, gardens, and flowing rivers were cherished, while chaotic, violent dreams were seen as signs that Ma'at's balance needed restoring through ritual or prayer. In this way, sleep became more than private rest. It was a nightly offering to Ma'at, a living demonstration of one's participation in the great cosmic design. Each time the eyes closed peacefully, each time a family woke refreshed and unharmed, it was proof that order had prevailed again over chaos. And so the Egyptians did not see sleep as trivial, but as one of the many ways mortals lived in rhythm with the eternal, sustaining balance not only in their homes, but in the very cosmos itself. For the Egyptians, dawn was never a casual return from sleep, but a sacred triumph, a proof that order had prevailed through the dangerous hours of darkness. Each morning carried the weight of cosmic drama. Ra had once again defeated Apophis, the serpent of chaos, and risen victorious from the underworld. To open one's eyes with the first light was to share in that victory, to be reborn alongside the sun. The return of the soul to the body was a fragile miracle. Each night, as they believed, the Ba departed into its wandering, guided by prayers and protected by amulets. Its safe return was never guaranteed, and so every awakening was greeted with gratitude. A farmer stretching beside his reed mat, a mother lifting her child from sleep, a priest opening his eyes within temple walls, all performed the same small act of acknowledgement, whispered thanks that the great cycle had held true once more. Morning rituals often began with washing, a symbolic cleansing that removed the residue of dreams, leaving the sleeper renewed for the tasks of the day. Families greeted the sunrise together, stepping outside to feel its warmth, believing that the rays themselves carried divine blessing. Bread and beer, left overnight as offerings, were sometimes consumed at dawn, their sanctity absorbed into the body as nourishment. Children were taught to face east as they ate, honoring the horizon where Ra appeared, a habit that bound daily life to the eternal rhythm of sun and sky. In temples, the arrival of dawn was marked with grandeur. Priests opened the sanctuary doors so that sunlight could fall upon the cult statue within, awakening the god's presence anew. Hymns of praise rose with the first cries of birds, filling the cool morning air with music that proclaimed victory over darkness. To stand in such a moment was to witness the convergence of cosmic and earthly time, a union of human gratitude and divine renewal. For those who had spent the night in worry, fearful of illness, of nightmares, or of spirits, the first light carried profound relief. The terrors of the night receded like shadows, and even the memory of them seemed weaker under the gaze of the sun. In this way, dawn was not only a natural event, but an emotional balm, a reassurance that life continued, that breath and warmth had been restored. Egyptians saw this cycle as endless, a pattern that would carry them not only through their days on earth, but also into eternity. Just as the soul departed and returned with each sleep, so too would it one day depart into the great journey of death, to rise again in the eternal dawn of the afterlife. Every night's rest and every morning's awakening was a rehearsal for that ultimate passage, a preparation for the moment when life would give way to death, and death in turn to everlasting life. And so the strangeness and wonder of Egyptian sleep rituals were not isolated customs, but part of this larger vision, that nothing was ever merely ordinary. To sleep was to risk, to wander, to converse with gods and spirits. To awaken was to triumph, to rejoice, to live again. Each cycle was an echo of the cosmos itself, a miniature version of creation's endless rhythm. In the stillness of night and the blaze of dawn, Egyptians found not only rest, but the reassurance that existence itself was steady, that the order of Ma'at held true, and that every day was a new beginning written across the sky.